There is a strange moment in life, and if you've lived long enough, you've felt it. It's the moment when you suddenly realize that you've been living in a story you didn't write. Your career, your beliefs, even the way you speak and dress were shaped more by the invisible hands of society, family, and circumstance than by your own conscious will. And here's just the unsettling truth. Most people will live their entire lives inside that story, never questioning it, never asking, who am I, really? Friedrich Nietzsche, the 19th century German philosopher, often painted as a provocateur and a rebel, saw this problem more clearly than almost anyone. To him, most people were not truly alive. They were sleepwalking. They were, as he called them, the herd, following the values, rules, and meanings handed down by others without ever asking if those values were worthy of them. And yet, Nietzsche didn't just diagnose the problem. He offered a terrifying and exhilarating alternative that you could, if you dared, strip away everything that isn't truly yours and create yourself anew. Not find yourself in the modern self help sense, but become yourself. Craft your own values, build your own life meaning from the ground up. But this is no small task. It demands courage. It demands that you face parts of yourself you would rather ignore, and it requires that you risk the comfort of belonging for the dangerous freedom of authenticity. In this journey together, we will explore six profound insights drawn from Nietzsche's philosophy and expanded with ideas from psychology, existentialism, and timeless wisdom that will guide you toward uncovering your real self. They will not be easy truths. Some may challenge how you've always seen the world, but if you stay with me, I promise you'll leave with more than ideas. You'll leave with a clearer path toward a life that is truly yours. Because if you do not create yourself, someone else will. And the only question is, will you live as the echo of another's voice, or will you find the courage to become the author of your own? There's a quiet, almost invisible force that shapes you from the moment you're born. It steps in the lullabies, sung to you, the bedtime stories read. The rules you Steffer told are just how things are. It's in the small praise for good behavior and the disapproving look when you step out of line. And long before you even realize it, this force has built the walls of the world you believe is yours. Nietzsche called this force the herd. To him, the herd wasn't simply a group of people, it was a state of mind. It was the instinct to conform, to belong, to fit into the rhythms of the collective, even at the cost of your own truth. The herd provides comfort, safety, and a ready made identity, but it also lulls you into forgetting that there might be more. Picture a young man, intelligent, curious, working in a prestigious job. His parents are proud. His friends admire him. Society rewards him. Yet, on the commute home each evening, a thought gnaws at him. Is this really me, or am I just playing the part I was given? The fear of answering that question keeps him in place, because stepping outside the herd feels like stepping into a desert with no map. Nietzsche believed that most people would never ask that question seriously, and even fewer would act on it, because to leave the herd is to give up the comfort of knowing who you are according to others. You lose the ready applause, the instant approval, and you risk becoming a stranger, even to the people you love. But here's the paradox. If you never step away, you'll never know if there's a self within you that could have been greater, freer, more alive. Psychology echoes this. Carl Jung warned of persona, the mask you wear to be accepted, and how, if left unchecked, it can smother the deeper, truer self. The danger isn't that you wear a mask, it's that you forget you're wearing one. So, how do you recognize the herd in your own life? It often shows up in the moments when you silence your thoughts before they're spoken, when you nod along to things you don't believe, when your life feels fine but strangely hollow. It shows up in the subtle dread you feel at the thought of disappointing people, not because you've done wrong, but because you've stepped off the script. Nietzsche doesn't suggest that you should despise the herd or live in perpetual rebellion. That's just another form of dependency, still defining yourself by the group, only in opposition to it. Instead, he invites you to use the herd as a starting point, a place to grow roots before you learn to walk on your own. The real turning point comes when you realize the herd is not your home, it is only the place you began. Your true home is not a geographical location, not even a fixed identity. It is the state of being in which your life reflects your own deepest convictions. And this means you will sometimes walk alone. There will be seasons when no one applauds, when you feel lost, when you question whether freedom was worth the price. But as Nietzsche writes in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, you have your way, I have my way. As for the right way, the correct way, and the only way, it does not exist. Your task is not to replace the herd's truth with someone else's truth. It's to walk far enough from the crowd that you can hear your own voice again, and then to live by it. So before we move on, ask yourself, what parts of my life feel like they belong to the herd, and what would it mean to begin leaving them behind? There comes a moment in some lives when the foundation cracks, not because of a sudden tragedy, but because the beliefs you've lived by simply stop feeling real. It might be the religion you were raised in, the political ideology you once defended, the dream you thought would complete you. You wake up one morning and realize the compass you trusted is no longer pointing anywhere. Nietzsche called this moment the death of God. It's one of the most quoted and least understood ideas in philosophy. He didn't mean that a divine being literally died. He meant that the old systems of meaning, the moral and spiritual frameworks that once held civilization together, were collapsing. In his time, science was replacing faith, modernity was questioning tradition, and the moral certainty of the old world was disintegrating. For Nietzsche, this wasn't just a historical observation, it was a personal crisis every thinking person would face at some point. What do you do when the truths you've built your life on no longer hold? Many people, he believed, respond with despair. They cling harder to the old beliefs, or they numb themselves with distraction so they don't have to confront the void. But Nietzsche saw another path, harder, lonelier, but infinitely more alive. The death of old gods, he said, is not merely an ending, it is an opening. Imagine this: you're standing in the ruins of a cathedral that once defined your life. The stained glass is shattered, the altar is gone. You can walk away, and many do. But if you stay, if you're willing to sit in the silence, you might begin to see something extraordinary. The roof is gone, and for the first time, the sky is wide open above you. This is what Nietzsche meant when he wrote, Must we ourselves not become gods, simply to appear worthy of it? When the external source of meaning disappears, you are faced with a terrifying freedom. You must create meaning yourself. Psychology tells us that this is one of the most challenging transitions a human can face. Viktor Frankl, the psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, called it the existential vacuum, the feeling of emptiness when life's old purpose disappears. For some, it leads to depression or nihilism, but for others, it becomes the fertile ground for a deeper, more authentic life. The danger here is twofold. Fall too quickly into despair, and you drift without direction. Rush too quickly to replace the old God with a new one, and you may simply trade one borrowed meaning for another. Nietzsche's advice: stay in the silence longer than is comfortable. Don't set rush to fill the void. Let the absence of ready made meaning force you to ask the questions you have avoided. What do I truly value? What is worth suffering for? What, if anything, would I willingly build my life around? This isn't about rejecting all traditions or burning down every belief. It's about refusing to live by them unconsciously. If a value survives your honest examination, keep it, but let it be yours, not an inheritance you never questioned. The death of old gods is painful because it strips away the safety of certainty. But certainty is often the enemy of growth. As the Zen proverb says, in the beginner sep's mind there are many possibilities. In the expert sep's there are few. When you let an old god die, you return to the beginner's mind, open, searching, alive to possibility. So ask yourself, what belief, once sacred, no longer feels true? And instead of rushing to replace it, can you sit under that open sky for a while and see what grows? There's a story, perhaps more of a parable, that I often return to. A man walks into a tailor's shop and asks for a custom suit. The tailor takes his measurements, listens to what he wants, and says, "Come back in 3 weeks." 3 weeks later, the man returns. He puts on the suit, and it sets tight in the shoulders, awkward in the waist. He winces and says, "This doesn't spet feel right." The tailor smiles. "It sups perfect. You'll just have to grow into it." That sips Nietzsche sips vision of the real self, not something you find ready made, but something you grow into. In the process of becoming that self, it's never comfortable because it requires you to become bigger than the person you currently are. Nietzsche didn't believe in personal growth as a pleasant journey. He believed in growth as transformation, and all transformation is painful. One must still have chaos in oneself, he wrote, to be able to give birth to a dancing star. Chaos, inner conflict, restlessness. These are not symptoms of failure. They are signs that something deeper is awakening. But here spits the dilemma. Most of us are taught to avoid discomfort. We choose security over risk, routine over challenge. Even when we sense that something in our life needs to change, a relationship, a career, a belief, we hesitate because the unknown is frightening and the familiar pain feels easier than unfamiliar possibility. Nietzsche knew this too well. He lived much of his life in physical pain, social isolation, and deep psychological turmoil. But rather than run from it, he turned it into philosophy. He saw suffering not as a curse, but as a forge, the place where your truest self is hammered into shape. He even offered a radical idea. What if your suffering is necessary for your becoming? What if, instead of asking, "How do I get rid of this discomfort?" you asked, "What is this discomfort trying to teach me about who I stem becoming?" This is where psychology aligns again. Modern therapists like Carl Rogers discovered that real transformation often begins the moment we accept the parts of ourselves we've been trying to reject. Not change them, but face them, integrate them, learn from them. In other words, to grow, you must stop running from discomfort. You must learn to sit with the unease, the awkwardness, the self doubt, because those are the moments where the false self begins to crack and the real one starts to emerge. Imagine this as a metaphor. Your life as it is now is a house. It steps, familiar and well decorated. But something in you knows the ceiling is too low. You start hitting your head on it. To grow, you must be willing to knock down a wall. And in doing so, you do create mess, dust, noise. For a while, it will look like destruction, not progress. But only by breaking open the old can you make space for the new. Nietzsche called this process self overcoming, not self improvement that still assumes you're just polishing the same version of yourself. Self overcoming is deeper. It's when you outgrow your current self so fully that you can no longer fit into your old shape. And this only happens if you let discomfort become your teacher. So the question isn't, how can I avoid pain? It's Seps. What kind of pain is worthy of me? What discomfort, what challenge, what inner chaos is asking me to rise, to expand, to become more? As Nietzsche wrote, he who has a why to live can bear almost anyhow. So I leave you with this. What discomfort in your life have you been avoiding? And what if that discomfort is the doorway to the person you're meant to become? If you search for Nietzsche's will to power online, you'll find endless debates. Some say it's about domination, about conquering others. And yes, history has twisted it into a justification for ego, greed, and even tyranny. But that sips not what Nietzsche meant. For him, the will to power wasn't about ruling over other people, it was about ruling over yourself. It was the deep instinctive drive in every living thing to grow, to expand, to become more than it currently is. You can see it in nature. A plant doesn't simply survive, it stretches toward the light. It pushes its roots deeper into the soil. A child doesn't just exist, they learn to walk, speak, explore. This same force lives in you, the desire to push past your limits, to turn potential into reality. But here sips where it becomes personal. For most people, this will to power gets hijacked by the herd. Instead of directing it inward towards self mastery, they direct it outward, chasing approval, status, and validation. The result? You might look successful by social standards while feeling quietly hollow inside. Nietzsche invites you to turn that drive inward again, to stop measuring your worth by what you control externally and start measuring it by how much you can transform internally. Psychologically, this mirrors the concept of intrinsic motivation, the kind of drive that comes from within, not from rewards or recognition. Studies show that people driven by intrinsic goals, like mastery, growth, and meaning, experience deeper satisfaction than those chasing purely external ones. Nietzsche's SIP's challenge is simple but demanding. Ask yourself, where is my will to power currently directed? Is it in building my own depth, or is it trapped in proving myself to others? There's a story from Nietzsche's life that captures this. He was a brilliant scholar, already a professor at 24, destined for a prestigious academic career. But he walked away from it all, the security, the admiration, because he felt it was pulling him away from his real work. For the rest of his life, he lived simply, sometimes in poverty, focusing on the writing that mattered to him. He directed his will to power, not toward status, but toward the creation of his philosophy. This doesn't mean you should abandon your career or possessions. It means you should know why you are pursuing them. If the pursuit serves your deeper becoming, it is worthy If it's only to keep up with the herd, it will leave you empty. Here sits the test. Does this goal expand my capacity to live as my true self? Does it make me stronger in mind, body, or spirit? Does it align with the person I want to become in 10 years? If not, then it is not your will to power speaking. It is the herd's voice in disguise. Directing the will to power inward is not about isolation, it's about sovereignty. It's about becoming the kind of person whose inner compass is so strong that no external circumstance can fully derail you. Nietzsche once wrote, "Become hard," and he didn't mean cold or unfeeling. He meant resilient, disciplined, able to withstand the pressures of the herd and the chaos of life without losing your shape. So ask yourself now, if all applause stopped tomorrow, if no one noticed your achievements, what would you still want to build, learn, or create? Simply because it matters to you. That is where your will to power truly lives. And that is where your real self is waiting to be born. Some people speak of finding themselves as if the self were a hidden treasure buried somewhere out in the world waiting to be uncovered. Nietzsche saw it differently. To my self was not something you stumbled upon, it was something you built. Become who you are, he wrote, by learning who you are. At first glance, this sounds paradoxical. How can you become something you already are? Nietzsche's answer, because the you that exists right now is only a fragment, raw material, not the finished form. He saw life as a kind of artistry. Your values, your habits, your relationships, your daily choices, these are your tools and colors. And each day, whether you realize it or not, you are shaping the sculpture of your life. The tragedy is that most people allow the herd, tradition, or chance to hold the chisel for them. Imagine an artist walking into a studio, placing a blank canvas on the easel, and then handing the brush to someone else. That is what it's like to live by other people's definitions of who you should be. Nietzsche Sepp's invitation is simple, but radical. Take back the brush, take back the chisel. Make your life your own work of art. Psychology supports this idea through self authorship theory, the process of constructing your own identity by integrating your experiences into a coherent, self chosen narrative. It's not about rejecting all influence. After all, even artists study the masters, but about refusing to let others dictate the final form. But self creation requires risk. It means letting go of the default version of yourself, the one that pleases others, avoids conflict, and fits in neatly. It means being willing to be misunderstood, to stand apart, even to fail in public. As Nietzsche put it, the individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. So, how do you actually practice the art of self creation? It starts with radical awareness. What do you genuinely love? Not what you've been told to love. What kind of work or play makes you feel most alive? What values feel so deeply yours that you would live by them even if no one agreed? Then comes the design phase. Nietzsche would say, envision the highest, boldest version of yourself you can imagine, not a fantasy, but a self that challenges you to grow. Ask, if I lived fully as that person, what choices would I make differently today? Finally comes the discipline of shaping. Like an artist, you must refine daily, adjusting, experimenting, discarding what doesn't fit, keeping what strengthens the whole. You don't wait for inspiration. You show up to the work of becoming even on days when the process feels clumsy or slow. There is no final version of the self, Just as a painting can always be touched up or a sculpture reshaped, you remain a living work, unfinished by design. And that is the beauty of it. You are not trapped by what you were yesterday. You are free to revise, to add depth, to change tone. Nietzsche admired those rare individuals who lived as creators of their own lives, people whose very existence felt like a statement, an artwork, a rebellion against the ordinary. They weren't stet perfect, but they were theirs. So I leave you with this thought. If a stranger were to watch your life for a week, your actions, your words, your silences, would they see the mark of a deliberate artist? Or would they see a canvas half filled by the brushstrokes of others? The choice, as always, is yours. Pick up the brush. There is a quiet danger in the pursuit of the real self. That's the temptation to make the journey entirely about you, your freedom, your growth, your self expression. Nietzsche valued individuality fiercely, but he also saw a deeper horizon. The self is not meant to be a final destination, it is meant to be a bridge. In Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche writes about the Übermensch, often translated as the Overman or Beyond Man. It is not a literal person, but an ideal, a vision of humanity evolved beyond its current limitations, living with greater creativity, strength, and depth. The point of becoming your real self, in Nietzsche's view, is not to sit satisfied with your own authenticity, but to use that authenticity as a launching point to create, to inspire, to contribute to something larger than yourself. Think of a tree. Its roots grow deep, its trunk grows strong, but its branches reach outward, offering shade, fruit, or shelter. The tree's growth is for itself, and yet, by its nature, it benefits others. The same is true for the person who has truly become themselves. But living beyond yourself doesn't mean sacrificing your truth to please others. It means your very existence becomes an offering through your work, your presence, your example. You live in such a way that your authenticity gives others permission to seek their own. Nietzsche contrasted this with what he called the last man, the comfortable, self satisfied individual who avoids risk, avoids depth, and lives only for small pleasures. The last man may be content, but he leaves nothing behind. The bridge, on the other hand, is willing to endure difficulty, to strive, to stretch, so that something greater may cross after him. Psychology touches this in the concept of generativity, introduced by Erik Erikson, the stage of life, where the question shifts from who am I to what am I giving to the world. It's the recognition that our own story is always part of a much larger narrative. To live beyond yourself, you must first become solid in yourself. Otherwise, you will try to give from a place of emptiness. And when you are solid, giving is no longer an act of self sacrifice, it is an expression of your fullness. Nietzsche himself lived largely misunderstood, his works not gaining real influence until after his death. He didn't live to see the ripples of his thought, but those ripples shaped generations of philosophy, literature, and psychology. That's the paradox of living beyond yourself. You may never witness the full impact of your life, and yet that impact may be your most enduring creation. So, what does it mean practically to live beyond yourself? It could mean mentoring someone who is just starting out, even if you gain nothing tangible in return. It could mean creating art, ideas, or projects that may not be appreciated now, but which plant seeds for the future. It could mean raising children, or nurturing communities, or simply embodying integrity so consistently that others feel its presence. The bridge does not get to cross itself. Its purpose is to connect, to support, to open the way. And the great irony is it is in giving yourself away in this way that you most deeply become yourself. Nietzsche's fifth challenge is clear. Don't it stop at becoming free. Ask, what will I do with my freedom? Dunstead, stop at becoming authentic. Ask, what will my authenticity serve? Your real self is not just for you, it's for the world that will inherit your example, whether you realize it or not. We began this journey with a simple but unsettling question. Are you living as yourself, or as the echo of another's voice? Friedrich Nietzsche's life and philosophy remind us that this is not a question to answer lightly, and certainly not one to avoid. Because the truth is, if you do not create yourself, the world will create you in its own image, and it will do so without your consent. We have walked through 6 insights, each a step away from the herd, and a step toward the person you might yet become. First, the herd is not your home. The recognition that the safety of belonging often comes at the cost of your truth. Second, the death of old gods, the courage to let go of inherited beliefs when they no longer speak to you, and to face the open sky without rushing to fill the void. Third, the courage to become uncomfortable, understanding that growth is forged in struggle, and that discomfort is not your enemy, but your guide. Fourth, the will to power as inner direction, reclaiming your drive for expansion and aiming it inward towards self mastery rather than outward approval. Fifth, the art of self creation, treating your life as a deliberate work of art, refining it day by day with your own hand on the brush. And sixth, living beyond yourself, realizing that your freedom and authenticity are not just for you, but for the world that will follow. If you've stayed with me through all of this, you already know this path is not easy. Nietzsche's never promised that it would be. He promised only that it would be yours, and that in the end is what makes life worth living. So here is my challenge to you. Before this day ends, take one small, deliberate step toward the life that belongs to you. It might be as simple as saying no to something that drains you, or yes to something that scares you. It might be writing down the values you choose, not the ones you inherited, and beginning to live by them. It might be creating something, however small, that expresses your real self without seeking anyone's permission. And when the voice of the herd whispers that you are selfish, rebellious, or foolish for doing so, remember Nietzsche Sift's words. And those who were seen dancing were thought to be insane by those who could not hear the music. The music is your own life's call. It may be faint at first, but it will grow louder the more you listen, the more you act, the more you trust it. And when you begin to live from that place, not as the echo, but as the origin, you will discover something strange. You will no longer need to find yourself because you will be too busy becoming yourself. That is the work. That is the art. That is the life. If this resonates with you, consider subscribing, not as a transaction, but as a way to continue walking together through these questions each week. Share your reflections in the comments, because while the journey to your real self is yours alone, the conversation about how we live can be something we build together. And perhaps in living this way, you will find yourself not just free, but worth